Check Podcasts.
Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to Chamber Chats, which as always is being recorded in the podcasting studios at Check Television, one of our chamber champions. I would like to acknowledge as always that I live and work in the unceded ancestral territory of the Lekwungen Nations, the Songhees and the Esquimalt. And Chamber Chats is made possible by the support of Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, and C-SPAN Victoria Shipyards. So Greater Victoria, as we know, is 13 municipalities. There are 9 First Nations as well. And amid all of that, it seems that the municipality that always gets the most attention is Victoria, whether it's something going on the political side or things that are revolving around the responsibilities of my guest. We'd like to welcome back to Chamber Chats, Victoria Police Chief Del Manak. Chief, hi, welcome back.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Bruce.
So, Chief, let's take a look back as we sort of move our way through the pandemic and all the implications. What is day-to-day for Vic PD like now compared to exactly about a year ago?
Well, I think we have a little bit more stabilization. We certainly know a lot more about COVID-19. Most people have not only got their doses, but they've got booster doses, multiple booster doses in some cases. So it's almost, it's not quite a return back to normal, but for the officers, they continue to have their personal protective equipment. We have since been able to, over a significant period of time during the height of COVID, is really kind of revise and make our processes safe so that the officers, when they're going into COVID hotspots or they're engaging with people that might be COVID positive, we make sure that our officers and hence their families are kept safe. So it's kind of been business as usual, and we went through ups and downs and the type of crimes that we saw during COVID. But it's extremely busy for Victoria police officers on the front lines, and it's extremely challenging because we continue to have a shortage of staff, and we're doing everything we can to attract more individuals to have find a career in policing.
Yeah, okay, we're going to touch on that again later on. But when we take a look at the work that Vic PD and all forces are doing day to day, but in particular your police force, managing people who are in unstable housing or in fact are indeed homeless. So BC Housing, the CRD, other organizations are talking right now about creating more affordable and transition housing. How will that affect day-to-day policing once those are built?
I believe, and I prescribe to the theory that it's a basic human right that everyone should have a roof over their head, and anybody who is struggling, that is the first step. But what we're finding is we need to make sure that we're actually identifying the root cause of what the problems are. I can tell you right now, I went out with my officers a couple weeks in a row, just on the front lines, walked up and down the 900 block of Pandora, went into Stadacona Park, and spoke to the officers who are engaging with our unhoused population daily. And clearly, it's not an issue right now that we don't have enough hotel rooms or enough housing. The issue is that we have a severe mental illness and a severe drug addiction problem. And many of the people that are now in our parks and in the 900 block of Pandora are there by choice. Many of them feel safe. They were actually exploited. They feel that if they're drug users, they're heavy drug users. When they're using, they're concerned that if they have a roof over their head and 4 walls around them, that in fact, if they do overdose, nobody would be there. There's significant restrictions around guest policies and whatnot. And so they feel that if they're out in a public area and if they do overdose, they know that somebody would come save them. Also, a number of the individuals that are out on our streets now are prone to violence. And so they're caught up in cycles of abuse, mostly through drug addiction, some through mental illness, and they're unserved or underserved. And so they've been evicted multiple times. We have a number of people that have evicted multiple times. So you could build as many housing facilities as you want. It's not going to help the current situation. So I think we need to be very careful that we don't just keep categorizing this as a housing shortage problem. We need to address the real root cause of why people are living out on our streets.
And when you and the officers of Vic PD are in the spotlight, of course, or in the media, if you will, it's dealing with the crime and violence that's associated with what is actually at its core, and I've said it before and so have you, this is a mental health and addiction crisis. That's what this is all about. And it's the mental health that needs to be managed a bit better. So, I mean, that impacts your officers too. I mean, they're They're in pretty dangerous circumstance sometimes. Stress levels are very high, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And it's, there's so much narrative around, well, should the police be responding? What should happen? Well, Bruce, between you and I, there's no one else to respond. We talked about the introduction of PAC teams. And so that is the peer assisted care team. And they're a civilian only team. We've been working closely with the City of Victoria and the BC Mental Health Association in launching these teams. They've worked in other regions, but here's what people don't talk about is these peer assisted care teams are made up of civilians. Anytime that there's violence, threats of violence, weapons, criminality, which is the case in many of the cases, the PAC team is not going to respond. They're going to go back to their vehicle and they're going to phone 911 and they're going to have the police come, who are going to be asked to de-escalate the situation, make it safe, ask the person to get calm, take away their weapon if they have a weapon, and then they can get the proper intervention. So I think that we just need to be careful when we're having these discussions that they're had with kind of the right mindset. And we're not just jumping to, well, the police won't be going to mental health calls. But as you said, this does create a tremendous amount of stress and trauma for the officers who are really trying to talk people off the ledge and are trying to de-escalate really intense situations. And you do that multiple times in a shift or multiple times in a work week, it takes its toll on our people.
What do you hear from your counterparts across the country? I mean, we see almost on a daily basis what happens in Vancouver, so we know all about that. What do you hear, though, from other centers across Canada?
Well, this is a problem that is right across the country. In fact, it's right across North America. And it's unfortunate that policy decisions and government decisions were made to kind of decentralize the servicing of many people who have severe mental illness. And I want to be clear, it's not everyone who has mental illness or not everyone who has a drug addiction. There are people who are unhoused, who are experiencing homelessness and having kind of low barrier services and outreach supports for these individuals works. It does. But we have a subset of the population that keeps getting ignored. We don't want to have a conversation about involuntary care. I don't know why we don't have that. So these are the individuals that are underserved or unserved. And so we need to talk about involuntary care. We need to talk about drug addiction. And we need to talk about how there is just not enough focus on treatment and prevention. And the main focus is on harm reduction, which is a good step, but it can't be the sole focus, which we seem to gravitate to. And we always want to go with an easy solution to a real complex problem.
We also, on an ongoing basis, hear about property damage, about robberies, about assaults happening all over the place. Now, is that sort of occurrence on the rise? And if so, why is that?
Yeah. So again, we have multiple people that are caught up in cycles of abuse and drug addiction. Many are prone to violence. They've lost the ability to self-regulate. They've lost all ability to be able to live in a normal functioning society. And so these individuals need intensive support and intensive care. Nobody is going to provide that unless the practitioner or the mental health professional feels safe in doing that. So it's really important that we invest in prevention and treatment and when people are ready. So we need rapid access to treatment beds. And I know that there's a move afoot, policy changes and government looking at this, but it can't happen soon enough because these really, really are challenging times and we're failing individuals on our streets. And I will tell you that our assaults on a random stranger on stranger, unprovoked assaults are up. We've seen them across the province. We've seen them here, right here in Victoria, and it's disturbing. And it's really creating a sense of fear for many people that they don't feel safe either in their neighborhood or coming downtown because they don't know who they might get confronted by.
Another thing that comes up in conversations very often is we've kind of alluded to it. That's the repeat offenders, and I want to talk about that issue next. Our guest on Chamber Chats today is Vic PD, Victoria Police Department Chief Del Manak. So, Chief, we hear these stories of someone committing a crime, being arrested, being held for a short period of time, and then released on a promise to appear later. There are some very prolific repeat offenders, and I'm pretty sure that you'd like to see a little bit more action on that side.
Yeah, for sure. There's no doubt about it that, again, what we need is a multifaceted approach. The police are one small part of the criminal justice system, and I understand it that when Bill C-75 was introduced a number of years ago, that's federal legislation, and all the province are expected to abide by the rule of the land, and then the law of the land. Sorry, and so it's important that happened. However, there are gray areas, and there is a level of flexibility, in my opinion, as the police chief, where I think that the BC Prosecution Service can really look closely at offenders who are violent, who have tremendous lengthy records of violence, of not appearing for their court date, breaching their conditions, and anytime there's violence that's committed in the community, there needs to be kind of a secondary look. And I can tell you that I've spoken to leaders. We're looking now at this new legislation and the new plan, the Safer Communities Action Plan that Premier Eby talks about. And so, we want to come to the table. It's just a little short on details. So I just want to kind of get a better understanding of how these units are going to function and what's that dialogue and discussion going to look like from the BC Prosecution Service. But I would say it's a step in the right direction, and it couldn't have come soon enough for the police officers, because I can tell you that the criminals on the street know it. They commit their criminal acts all day long. They get arrested and they're released within hours, only to then just continue on committing violent criminal acts. And that's just not really looking in the best interest of public safety and community safety. And in fact, in my opinion, it's eroded the public's trust in the criminal justice system overall.
You referred to the Premier, David Eby, who has made some comments and comparisons with Victoria approaching the conditions of the Lower East Side in Vancouver. What goes through your mind when you hear that?
Yeah, well, those are accurate. If I look at I started my career with the Vancouver Police Department many years ago, and you look at what's happened in the downtown East Side, it's unacceptable. It's not safe. We're failing individuals, and I think that, to be honest, we need greater capacity. But right now, we continue to work in silos, and as I mentioned, I think there is a tremendous amount of focus on harm reduction, and not trying to pick on harm reduction, but there are three other pillars. There's prevention, enforcement, and treatment. And we really need to find kind of a balance of what we're doing. And I think that people need hope. They need to know that the police, social agencies, the health authority, government, we're all working together in the best interest of individuals that need our help, because they don't have, as I said, they don't have the ability to self-regulate and live in a normal society like the rest of us do. So we're really, really important that we provide them with the necessary supports. And to be honest, our officers are put, Bruce, in a no-win situation. It's no win for them. Many of our critics don't want the police to respond to mental health calls. And then when we do go, there's no one else to go. It's all downloaded to the police because there's lack of services to actually prevent the person from going into crisis. And then our officers are having to diffuse and de-escalate a situation, which can be extremely traumatizing and intense. And those are things that we would like to avoid by investing upstream in services that prevent people from going into a crisis in the first place.
And the disturbers or the disruptors within that population, there's very few people, right? It's not all of them by any means. It's a pretty compact group, isn't it?
It is. And that's where we want to work with the BC Prosecution Service and identify who these individuals are, especially the ones that are prone to violence and criminality. And many of these individuals are actually exploiting people that are vulnerable and marginalized. And so getting them off the streets, having a strong deterrence and consequences, and hold them accountable for their actions, I think is something that the police need to do. And I think that we've kind of sidestepped that. And we're trying to deal with using kid gloves to try to deal with a really complex problem, especially when we're dealing with violent criminals. And that's just really not where I think our community wants. And to be honest, Bill C-75, Bruce, part of the messaging for that was that it was to restore public confidence in the criminal justice system. And I think from all accounts, it's done literally just the opposite.
Where's the conversation these days about regional police forcing or a regional police force? Is that still talked about much?
Well, not really. I mean, there's so many other issues that we're kind of dealing with. I wish it was talked about. I think if you look at major centers across Canada, uh, regional policing can work. The technology is there that you can still have local community policing in some of your suburban areas. All cars don't have to be in downtown Victoria. Again, I started my career in Vancouver, and I can assure you that Friday, Saturday night, down in the Granville Entertainment District, all the police cars weren't there. They weren't all down in the downtown east side. They had zones, and we were able to scale up and scale down depending on what was happening out in the community. But it allowed the police the ability to actually have resources available to them when they were most needed and where they were most needed. And so I think even with technology, that's even improved significantly. And I certainly approach a regional view and a regional perspective on policing, among other things, not just policing, but we can certainly start with policing.
Yeah, because you do collaborate with the other forces at times anyway, right?
Oh yeah, we have great relationships with all of our, and we have integrated units, and we applaud the success of the integrated units, but nobody really wants to take that next step. And I know that the provincial government puts it down to the municipalities and say, if you want to have it, you can come to us and we'll facilitate it. But it's very difficult to get a number of partners on board. I think what's really needed is leadership at the provincial level. They're responsible for public safety in the province of BC, and if they dictated and said, this is where we want to go, make it happen, or we'll make it happen for you, that would be the best day ever, because I think that we could collaborate and come up with a better model of policing than what we currently have.
And into this entire circumstance came ice cream and candy a short time ago. I want to talk about that next. Our guest today on Chamber Chats is Victoria Police Chief Del Manak. And Chief, we heard it was kind of heartwarming in a way that there had been a spike in people who were committing criminal acts and stealing ice cream, stealing candy. First of all, why was that?
Yeah, I think there's when you're drug addicted, it's basically having a sweet tooth, and it kind of takes the edge off a bit. And who doesn't like ice cream and sweets, right? And I guess it just gets kind of a little bit more magnified for those that are consuming drugs. And so there we did see a spike in thefts, people going in, whether they're stealing ice cream or chocolate bars. But yeah, there was an increase, and this is a kind of a feel-good story where an organization is kind of stepping up to kind of fill the void and fill the gap. But really, if we peel it back, should we not be doing something more to deal with the problem? Like, why are we just keeping, even if it's just pharmaceutical drugs, and it's we call it a safe drug supply, but it's not really safe because drugs are never safe. But that's kind of the terminology sometimes that many are using. But at the end of the day, shouldn't we be working with individuals to try to wean them off and to improve their quality of life? And I think that having more focus on that, and as I've said, prevention. So who is the next person who is going to be severely drug addicted? Can we take interim steps in helping that individual stabilize and not actually get into a cycle of abuse and violence and something that's going to allow their life to kind of spiral out of control? So we just need better investments, and I honestly feel we can do better, and we ought to be focusing on doing better.
Yeah, and there was one of our chamber members, 49 Below Ice Cream, actually stepped up and took a bunch of ice cream to our place as a donation. So I want to just take a look now, Chief, if we could, at the relationship between crime levels and inflation. In other words, the cost of living. Those who have very little in these times of rapidly increasing costs have some serious problems, right? So there is a correlation between the two, right?
Yeah, there is. I don't have any data on that right now. Now that we're in the midst of kind of some of the inflation and the pressures, and we know where things are going. But man, I'm telling you, just to make ends meet, there's so many people that are really on the verge of needing help, and we see that every Christmas as we look at how many people are accessing food banks and are going on lists to try to have a good Christmas for their family and whatnot. It really is quite challenging. The cost of living is expensive here, and there's inflationary pressures that don't help that situation. And yeah, it's just challenging all around, and also it impacts people's mental health. It impacts their level of anxiety and stress of trying to care for their family. And we haven't really seen a correlation right now to crime in that area. But like I say, it's trying times. And again, it's really, really nice to see the generosity of the Greater Victoria region, and how people do step up, and how extremely generous they are, and recognize that there are other people that are in more need. And I always find that people are quite generous here.
And despite the issues that we talk about, there are still those who want to pursue a career in police services, right? And you're always recruiting. So tell me about that. What if someone has an interest in that? What should they do?
Sure. Yeah. So policing is an extremely honorable and noble profession. It continues to be. We are fortunate that we attract some of the best of the best. A lot of people are making a transition from other kind of first responder agencies like BC Sheriffs or BC Corrections. But also we see people interested right out of high school and university, and also people switching jobs. We actually have a lot of teachers, people that got into the teaching profession and have made actually a smooth transition. So go to vicpd.ca. It's pretty easy to navigate. We are hiring, we're actively hiring, and we're looking for good quality people to join our police department. And there's a quite a stringent process to get hired. We'll provide you with all the training, but what we're looking for is people that are leading with care and compassion.
And you're involved in kind of cool things. You did that hockey game with the Royals back in November, which was a fundraising thing. And that brings me to the final question for today. Is it because you were born and raised on Vancouver Island that you're a New York Islanders fan? Is that why?
You want to end on a high note. Thanks for that. Yeah. No, back in the day, everyone likes to support a winner. Bruce, I know you're a Red Wings fan, but I've always, the Islanders were the team that was winning the cup. Yeah. And we forget that, 30, 40 years ago, the hockey games, they weren't on TV as much as they are now. Now you have a choice of watching any team pretty much that you want. But back in the day, the New York Islanders were winning the Stanley Cup. And that's the team that I kind of started supporting as a kid. And throughout the ups and downs of the Islanders, I've supported that team, and including going to Vancouver every year that they come play in Vancouver.
Well, that was the Bossy and Trottier years and all. It was great times for the Islanders, and there are great days ahead for the Islanders and for the Red Wings. Just going to say, Chief, we know you're a busy guy, and we appreciate your time. Thanks for all you do, and thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me on, Bruce.
Chief Del Manak, Victoria Police Department. I'm Bruce Williams. We'll see you again for another Chamber Chat.